Why do communists support the Palestinian struggle?
Well, the first thing is that communists always stand on the side of the oppressed. Communists fight for the complete liberation of all of the poor, the downtrodden, and the oppressed masses across the world. And the Palestinians are some of the most oppressed layers across the whole of the world today. And it's very clear to us that the root cause of their oppression, first and foremost, comes from the Israeli state. But the Israeli state itself could not do what it is currently doing without the support of America or Britain or any other Western imperialist power. They give Israel the funding, the weapons, but also the diplomatic support to oppress the Palestinians and continue their actions. And they do that because Israel is their main ally in that whole region, who they want to use as a base to continue to exploit the region for their own imperialist interests in terms of resources and various other things. And then on top of that, it's very clear to us that the Palestine movement today is becoming a lightning rod for all of the accumulated anger in society. From the perspective of communists in Britain, our own state, which is funding and supporting what Israel is doing, is also attacking the living conditions of workers and young people in Britain today. It's also attacking our right to protest. When people come out to express their opinions on the war and what Israel is doing, people are arrested, or the right to protest itself is completely disbanded, and they're attacked violently from the police. So actually, Palestine now and the Palestine movement is becoming a prism through which all anti-establishment mood is being refracted. And as communists, it's important for us. We are, massively involved in that struggle. We support the Palestinians' right to a homeland. And we can also see how it is connected with all of the states, whether in Britain or America, and their interest in maintaining division at home in their own countries as well.
What do we say about the Arab regimes in the region?
A lot of the Arab regimes across that whole region, they pay lip service to the struggle of the Palestinians. They talk about, supporting and connecting with their Muslim brothers and sisters. But in reality, if you look at what they're doing, countries like Egypt, they actually act as border guards for Israel, and they maintain the borders where they're in place. And a lot of these countries, Saudi Arabia included, just before the most recent events from October the 7th, they were looking at trying to normalize relations with Israel. They've had to stop that because of the way that the movement has expanded. The fact is, across the whole of those countries and across the whole of the Middle East, many people, the majority of people, have great sympathy with the Palestinians and the young people and workers. They want to do more. And actually, it's their governments and their states that are holding things back. In a lot of these countries, I would say that the governments are actually scared of their own people. They're scared of how these movements could develop. There was an amazing video in Egypt of a football stadium where there were tens of thousands of young people chanting, our hearts and souls we give to you, Palestine. There were also student protests that erupted, emulating what we were seeing across the US, the student encampments in support of Palestine. And so it's clear to us that Palestine is becoming a focal point for anger across the whole region that can quickly spread into anger against their own governments and their own states, who play a role in, one, maintaining or not allowing the struggle of the Palestinians to take on a more effective route, but also that these governments and states are involved in oppressing their own people as well. And that is why the issue is so current and so alive. And the states are very worried about where they see them going.
How do we say the global movement for Palestine should advance?
It's clear to us that the liberation of Palestine requires an international movement. As we said earlier, the resources that Israel has at its disposal come from the fact that Israel is backed by a global capitalist imperialist system. Israel is backed by countries like America and Britain. And so it's imperative for us in those countries to do everything we can to attack our own ruling class. That's why it's right that the American students sparked this whole movement to call on or to demand that their universities divest from investing in arms companies that supply arms to Israel, and then it spread all over the world. The same thing is happening in Britain, but also that different aspects of the war machine are built in different parts of the world as well. We look to the examples of the dockers in India, for example, who refused to load ships that would be sending weapons to Israel. A similar thing took place in Barcelona. We want to see an international movement grow, linked with the working class especially. And there's a tradition for this. There's a revolutionary tradition across the Middle East as well, in fact. It was only, just over a decade ago, started in 2011. This was a powerful revolutionary movement that overthrew different regimes, and that's a very good thing. That kind of struggle, if it is connected with a real program, and ultimately we would say real organization, is the way in which we can actively change things. We've got no illusions that the current regimes across the Middle East are going to liberate the Palestinians themselves. They won't do it, but it's the workers and the youth of those countries that actually could. But in order for that to happen, they need to take power. But that's not an easy task. It can only be done on the basis of a real organization and a real international, which is ultimately what we're striving to build. The Revolutionary Communist International is going to have its founding congress in just a few weeks on the 10th of June in Italy. And we're appealing to as many young people and revolutionaries and people looking to the ideas of communism especially to participate in that, so that we can move this movement from being a kind of loose network of well-intentioned and committed people who want to see change in the world to an actual organized force that can begin to take action.
The video of your interview with Suella Braverman has been incredibly popular. Do you have a message for the workers and particularly the youth of the Middle East?
I would say that part of the reason that the movements in America and Britain and other Western countries took off is because people recognized that we could no longer just appeal to politicians as a way to see change and as a way to actively stop the war and stop what Israel is doing. And I think that process needs to take place internationally and especially across the Middle East. There is a revolutionary tradition and struggle across all of these countries, and what we need to do is revive that and build a movement that goes beyond just petitions or legalistic routes or institutions that come from the establishment, but actually workers and young people must have faith in themselves and themselves alone and begin the process of organizing on their own terms in the interests of their own class, because there are different interests at play here. The reason that the governments across the Middle East aren't doing anything to liberate the Palestinians in a real meaningful way is because they come from a different class background. They aren't interested in liberating the Palestinians or the poor or the oppressed of the whole region. It is only us ourselves who can do that. The revolutionary wave that began in 2011 gave us a glimpse of the potential that exists and the real desire for fundamental change across that whole region. But what was missing and what was lacking was an organization and a leadership, a principled revolutionary communist leadership that could lead that revolution to actually taking power and unite the millions of people that came out on the streets on a program that could solve the problems, the contradictions of their lives. That leadership and that organization is exactly what we're trying to build. And so we would appeal for you to join the Revolutionary Communist International.